Welcome to Gatorade, an opinion route show to help market research professionals learn and grow. In this podcast, we share stories, insights, and philosophies that unlock enterprise value for the modern market research company. Here's our host, CEO and founder, Terence McCarron.
All right. Hey, Rich, you just came back after a couple days attending the Insights Association Ignite Day conference on data quality. This has been going on a few years, if memory serves, and you've been a regular attendee and speaker at these things. This year was no different. So I just figured this would be a great opportunity for us to just do a recap and to bring some Q&A to the industry for those who weren't able to be there that day, given how important topic this is. So before we get into the Q&A, just what was it like there? What was the vibe like? I know it's an area of huge concern, dominant talking point in the industry, but some of the juiciest parts of it are often the side conversations that go on. So why don't you bring some of that to this conversation so we can learn a little bit from you?
This was the second year for this conference. Last year being the first year, loved it. It had quite a vibe about it. Really good presentations that came out of last year. Got a lot of conversation. This year was a little different location, which made a little bit of a difference in the conversations and the presentations. That being said, all the cast of characters around data quality were absolutely there. I think there was really good intention in terms of just what they wanted to understand, what other people thought, what the thought leadership presentations were going to be about. You're right, a lot of conversations were being had on the side between companies that don't normally get to see each other or companies that even compete with each other. I know that I spoke to all of the competitors within the data quality space that we know of. The presentations themselves, candidly, they weren't necessarily as pointed as they were last year around data quality. I think a few of them were really giving alternatives to how data quality can play out for the research side, which was good to see. I think the panel I was on was good. Like any panel, you always want more. You and I can get into that piece. I do think that one of the better, oddly enough, one of the better presentations there were two of them. One around the benchmarking that the Insights Association is doing and where we're at with that. I'm on that committee. Another was just around the understanding of what fraud looks like on the outer edge and how it comes in. There was some really good conversation that happened after that presentation. All in all, I would say that last year was a little more leveled up than this year, and maybe that's just because this is a sophomore year for this. It's one of those moments where the expectation is much higher, and I do look forward to next year. These are needed. I think we could fill 2 days with this, but I do think that this is needed. These conversations are needed. And I think there's much more that we can do, and this has a lot of potential.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you have a conference that's dedicated around a single topic, sometimes it does get redundant. It ages out pretty quick, especially if you have the same players showing up and nothing really changed in their businesses the previous year, right? It almost creates this almost like spiral. So for me, part of why I wanted to do this here with you today is, Opinion Route's been deeply committed on a company by company basis for our clients and helping them once and for all, like put to bed recurrent problems. So for me, these kind of conversations, I want to use this as a springboard. Let's not make next year's data quality, day conference be the same topics, the same problems, the same data that proves there are problems. Like it gets old after a while, right? At some point, we have to actually change the way we work so that this is systemically addressed. So I want to dig into that a little bit. If anyone's spoken on a panel who's watching this, you'll know what I'm about to say. But for those who haven't, you being part of a panel, one of the nice things is you get kind of a heads up on some of the questions that may come up. And in this scenario, there were a few that I think you and I believed ahead of time were really going to land, and it seems like they did. So what I wanted to do was recreate a few of those questions here in this conversation so others can benefit from it. So let's start with kind of a big one. And this is, one that's near and dear to my heart. But Rich, who actually owns data quality at the end of the day?
Surprised that the question is there. It's always been the market research agency that owns data quality. The reason they do is that there's a real parallel to this in construction of all things. If a general contractor really goes after what they need to do, they are really focused on the client, the customer, the homeowner. They also have to focus on who supplies those skilled trades. And if they choose incorrectly, then they get fired, but the skilled trade gets to keep on moving through. And I think there's a real parallel to how that plays out here. You've got to have good partners as an MRA. And most importantly, you and I have talked about this, and it's one of the things that Opinion Route absolutely believes in, and that's trust but verify. And it's one of those moments where verify should be in a lot of different places. It should be in the conversation that you're having with the partners that you're working with, both at a project level and as well at the strategic level of the organization. But also, as you start to understand how they work, you really need to understand, do they have the same philosophy as you? And do they have a philosophy that takes care of you? That's one of the most important things. Market research agencies don't get paid on data collection. They get paid on recommending for business decisions. They get paid on consulting to make sure that the question is right so they can answer the question and analyze the data the way they need to. They don't get paid to make sure data quality is what it needs to be. That's in many ways something that they have to do. It's the lights that are on, but it's a very important situation that the MRA, while the MRA is the one that owns it, all of the contractors, all the skilled trade in that same idea, they're the ones that are culpable as well, and they need to be culpable, and we need to expose that a bit more.
Yeah, I used to always say it depends who you're talking to, right? So if you're talking to the end client, the one who's purchasing, and your example, hiring the general contractor, they would say it's the research agency. Like they don't even want to know if they're involved in something sideways on data quality level. Multiple things went terribly wrong, right? So they would say, look, that's part of what I'm buying. The market research agency, and having been on the sample side for so many decades, it's very common where the market research agency will just look at the vendors, right? Both before anything goes wrong in a proposal and after. If something goes wrong, they're like, well, the vendor gave me bad data. Ultimately, I think I've really come to believe what you just said, which is, practically speaking, it just comes down to the market research agency. Like you will be held accountable. So even if you get in the jam on a data quality situation and you tell your client, well, the vendor's messed up, it's still going to be a black mark against you in their eyes when they have another piece of budget to deploy. It's just the way it is, right? It's human nature. So if that is the case, that's probably feels unfair, the market research agencies, for good reason. But ultimately, I think that's just the practical reality of the psychology of the food chain and how a project gets, bought and sold. So to me, this is a moment where they could step up and really accept the responsibility in a way that's going to really raise the esteem in the eyes of the client. So for me, I see it as a big opportunity, not like a difficult moment. It doesn't have to be, at least. So the next question that I thought was really interesting, because this is where I think a lot of the narratives around new potential threats get people really scared. So, Rich, looking at the data quality technology, just broadly speaking in the industry, but also us, what does it do really well today? What does it catch? And then what is it missing?
What it does well today is really, anything around understanding what the device is about, understanding connectivity issues, things like proxies. It can surely go after understanding that space. What it doesn't do well is intention. We're not there yet on the intention, and we could be. I think the data shows that we can be there for that, and that's around behavioral. And what opinion route really looks at with this is less about one tool solving a problem. It's more that we are incorporating a full system into the mix. So anything we need to add, we just add into it. It's not a matter of having to reconfigure our whole system just to take care of this one thing. And it's also not additive. It's a piece of the puzzle that we know that we need to add based on evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. From my standpoint, I'm really in the same camp. No big surprise. I think what the technology does well today is catches a lot of the things that have hit the mainstream narrative for years, right? The bots, the click farms, the proxies, there's a lot of known fraud methodologies in the broader online ecosystem that over the last bunch of years, we have done a phenomenal job at Opinion Route, but also outside our walls, bringing into survey level data protection. What is it missing? I think ultimately one of the biggest faults in our market research ecosystem is it's a collection of tools that's fit for a single purpose. And what I think we've invested in heavily is connecting all those dots, thinking of fraud prevention, data quality, quality protection as a system rather than a feature set of an API. So pulling all those signals together to tell a deeper story than any one single methodology can do, I think that's the biggest investment and growth area that we've really achieved over the last few years. So totally with you on that. The last big one that was actually shared on that panel, which led to a bunch of discussion, is really kind of sensitive, I think. So we talked a little bit about the MRAs ultimately practically owning data quality in the ecosystem. So let's talk about what data quality limitation is generally still avoided. So it's a topic that no one really wants to talk about with the end clients. So what do we avoid talking about with the end clients as it relates to data quality and perhaps some limitations?
In many ways, it depends on the client. You got to read the room on the situation. Some clients just don't want to know. One of the main data quality issues that I see is really around what they don't understand when it comes to the sample partners that they work with. The bigger issue to understand there is that if panel A says that they have a double opt-in panel, that they check these things, they check those things, they have a great system. But what you need to understand with that data quality conversation is that usually is only 15 to 20% of their throughput. What are their subsources? That conversation is a very difficult conversation to have because it has to reframe how they understand where their participants are coming from. They may change suppliers, but in the process of changing suppliers, they only change 20% of their throughput because the other supplier is using just the same vendors. So they really need to understand that. And it's a difficult construct to explain to them when they haven't heard it before.
Yeah, I'd agree with you entirely. I think that's a bit of a rabbit hole too, because every answer prompts three new questions and you never need to get to the bottom of it because the ultimate loop that is. And it's not what people think it is. That's 100% for sure. This comes back to a point we made a few minutes ago, but the end clients don't want to have to worry about this. You said it really well many times. They're contracting with the market research agency to get some strategic answers and guidance. This is really all process and the inner workings of how the sausage is made. The bigger challenge comes up is when the MRA is avoiding learning for themselves these kind of dynamics. If they're still choosing really to stick with language that went out of viability 15 years ago, well, that's a conscious choice. And that to me is a very dangerous game. I don't think that describes a lot of market research agencies, but it is a meaningful number that of large companies that just choose to propagate language and concepts that are clearly no longer in existence. So at that point, instead of just dodging hard conversation with clients, they're actually perpetuating a false narrative. That is a ticking time bomb, I believe, in the relationship between the MRA and their clients. All right. So those are three that did get covered on the panel. and we're bringing it now to you. But Rich, my best part about this is you said, oh, they avoided so much of what they should have been asking. And look, I'll just say, I'm really practical on this stuff. The industry associations do a great job looking out for a variety of constituents. And when you have a difficult topic that involves responsibility on a lot of stakeholders' part, like data quality, there is a tendency or temptation for public discourses to get anesthetized a little bit, right? They get glossed over, they get softened a little bit. So what I want to do here, and you had some great ones, is why don't you sort of fire off a few questions that you wish had been asked in a panel discussion like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really starts from the title of the panel. The title of the panel was The Commercialization of Modern Survey Fraud. While I love getting in front of these panels and talking about the things in front of the audiences and talking in general about this stuff, and one of the main reasons I love doing it is I think we are finally getting to a point where we're past the awareness moment. We need to talk about application, right? Application is very important in this mix. So one of my first questions here is, are we fighting fraud with the right mindset?
That is a juicy one. I would say no. The reason why I would say that is I think there is no such thing as a collective mindset on this. I think every company is in really wildly different places. When I think about MRAs, I talk to companies every day that literally have no plan, literally no plan. There's no narrative, there's no talk track, there's no operational strategy at all around fraud prevention or data quality assurance. And then we talk to clients all the time that are at the other end of the spectrum where the data quality process is deeply ingrained in their methodology. And their mindset is determined based on not using what's best available, but using what could be part of their IP. And those are so wildly different ends of the spectrum. And then think about all the variations in between. So for me, there isn't a collective mindset. And the right mindset, I would argue, is it needs to be holistic. It needs to be humble because it'll never be perfect. And it needs to be contextual. And by that, I mean, sometimes there's a righteous indignation within our industry, like that this problem should never exist. I'm a little more practical in my mindset that I think fraud threats are ubiquitous in every industry that touches the internet. So to me, that maybe that's part of our humility, but it's also context that I don't believe anybody that says they're 100% perfect or they've totally nailed it down. Anyone that is seeking that as part of their mindset for solving the problem is doomed to fail. So that's my take on the mindset. What do you think?
I think the way that I would start that answer is we really need to acknowledge that we are an active, attacked e-commerce center. We absolutely are getting attacked every day, and not because it's malicious. They're not in there to maliciously do something to survey data. They're there to make money. And that process is something we have to really acknowledge that there's a term, never zero. We're never going to get to zero. If you look at other industries, you take the digital advertising industry, a $1 trillion industry with a $100 billion problem. They know that there's a never zero in that situation. So what they're looking to do is to help their customers that are creating commerce between each other be protected in some way, shape, or form. We need to do the same thing here. We need to understand that cybersecurity needs to be a part of what we do. And we also need to be able to translate that in a way that MRAs can understand how it applies to them. One of the things I mentioned earlier is this layering approach. We really need to think in layers of what's going on. And you and I have talked about this. There's different layers to the ecosystem, but there's also different layers to what is a little bit more approachable to an MRA, which is the study that they're working on. And those layers are pretty obvious, right? They're obvious now, but even 3 years ago, they were not obvious. And everyone wanted to just look at it as being, if we can stop the bad devices, we fix the problem. And that's where the wildfire started in the in-survey area. But you and I had always talked about the fact that that needed to be a full system. That's one of the bigger issues that I see with this is I don't really care what tool I use. I'm going to build most of it in the first place. But that being said, what I care about is layering it in a way to understand that when the person moves or the device moves from one stage to another, we have a different set of um, issues that we need to solve for. And we need to connect all of them so that they become much more holistic in the evaluation. In all the days that I've been talking about this, AI brings it to form much more than anywhere else, and that's that context matters. Context matters, right? And AI is built on context. So when you think about the context of what the device looked like as they're answering questions, and you think about what the questions and their answers look like and how they answered those questions, how all of that needs to then accumulate to the post-survey moment where you can evaluate the holistic piece of that feedback. That's where I go with that, is that it's much less about the tools and much more about a system that we need to put together. I'm going to move to the next question. Are there financial incentives that inhibit data quality?
The economics. Yeah, to me, there's a little history in this. And, when I came up in the industry decades ago, like you, everything was aligned. So there was a cost per completed interview and a call center model. And that's ultimately the KPI, right? Are we delivering enough completes? And in the call center model, we would always manage our profitability and our effectiveness based on how much it's costing us on a labor standpoint to deliver that. So we had a financial incentive to get really good hiring and training interviewers, prepping them for the study, keeping high value respondents going, converting that. All the financial incentives were aligned. Um, Now it's gotten in a more automated programmatic world. It's gotten the financial incentives have diverted. And from a major sample company, their costs to generate survey respondent traffic is not tied to a CPI in most cases. It's tied to buying affiliate traffic on a cost per click basis. So their profitability is based on how much revenue they can produce based on a single click that costs them something. So that's where we have the advent of routers. That's where we have second chances, third chances, fourth chances for respondents, which leads to exhausted respondents. And that's also where the sub suppliers and the affiliate networks aren't incentivized around a good quality complete. They're just trying to drive up raw traffic, right? Just a click and they get paid, and it's automated payments in a lot of cases. So this is also this is basically the economic conflict. The financial incentives are not aligned within the supply chain of affiliate network, large sample company, and then MRA. They're all seeking different things. And that creates a substantial systemic problem that plays out in conflict every single day when a single project's data goes sideways.
I want to answer very close to the same. The market research agency is really looking for data for their ability to create an analysis. When they create a plan, a study plan to understand that, they have to see how many completes they can get in that mix. Now, completes very quickly as they look upstream to find where they're going to come from. Those completes turn into a feasibility conversation. That feasibility conversation turns into sourcing. That sourcing conversation then turns into a bit of an issue around which sources to use. And those sources are then looking to get volume in, because feasibility is just another word that is downstream from volume. Volume has to play out before feasibility actually plays a role. What happens in that situation is toxic, specifically around how the affiliates are attracting people in. They're attracting people in with the candy of automatic incentive and making sure that you can get what you want without having to do anything other than sign up. They're much less just validation in general. One of the questions that came out in the conference was, do we want identity verification? And my whole point was, we're going from 0 to 11 with the idea of identity verification. How about we just check some of the things that we're supposed to check in the first place? Like making sure the phone number doesn't change from survey to survey, making sure that the IP address country doesn't change from survey to survey. These things that are very common and contextual across, there's the word context again. How about we just measure horizontally the profile of that person to make sure that, did they say that they were an ITDM last week? And did they say that they are now a fireman this week? And I have, an electrician the following week. We need to understand those moments and tie them together into a system. The issue that happens there is that the financial incentive for every one of those businesses, they're meeting their goal, right? They're meeting their goal to create volume. They're meeting their goal to hit that feasibility number. They're meeting their goal to get the analysis that they need to get, but none of them have anywhere close to the same sort of construct of what the business model is, and they don't plug in together nicely. That's a big issue. Have we contemplated the impact of sample vendors sharing each other's supply?
Yeah, talk about Pandora's box, right? First of all, I will just say one of my favorite things is when I see an RFP come across from a client and they're deciding they're going to volume buy for the next year. And it almost always has some rules of what you have to follow. And one of the most common things on every RFP in that scenario is it has to be your own double opt-in panel only, right? Like that is so commonly said and so rarely followed that it's almost shocking it's still making its way into 2026 RFPs. So yeah, the absolute reality is all the vendors are just APIing into each other. And I think most of us know that at this point. I think maybe 8 years ago that would have been, well, not my vendor, but now I think people have become, more aware of that, and very few like will argue that even. But have we really contemplated, like, well, what does that mean for the way we do business? I would say absolutely not. I think it's a rabbit hole most people want to avoid thinking about. But like literally to your point, if one vendor fails on my job and I fire them, I bring on another vendor. Did I really change anything if it's the same subtraffic? What does it mean just economically that on the sample side, competition has been eliminated? So pricing is often very normalized. Feasibility rarely varies. What you can do to recover on a project that's going sideways, those ideas have really shrunk. There are so many implications to the share and share alike, including the removal of competition, that I think is really unhealthy for any economy, but particularly ours. So, no, have we deeply contemplated what is the knock-on effects? What are the implications of more of an anti-competitive environment? No. And I'll take this one step further. In the programmatic era, the bigger programmatic sample companies love calling it, this is performance marketing now. In a lot of ways, they're right. But what they're really saying, if you think about the implication of that, is they are not competing for the survey work with researchers. What they're saying is the researchers are competing with every other survey for the right to access good traffic. I mean, has a market research firm really contemplated that? That your vendor doesn't think they're competing for your budget, you're competing for their supply? Like, have you thought through what that means in a day-to-day on a project by project? I would submit we have not.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack with this question. Let me answer that last question or that last statement, because that's just flooding my head. One of the vendors we worked with, we do not work with them any longer, said, if there's a lot of rejections coming from that client, I'm just not going to use them anymore. I have plenty of people. I don't have a problem with demand. That is a big issue. He basically said, yeah, no problem with demand. He knows it'll come in. The thing I see with this is that it goes back to the same thing I said before. Each of the layers need to understand what they do. That doesn't mean they need to own it. They just need to understand what it does. Just like going back to our original conversation, the general contractor needs to know how the plumber works. They need to know that when they see stainless steel showing up or copper showing up or PVC showing up, they understand that that's the right stuff for that moment, right? Same thing happens here. MRAs need to take enough ownership of the partnership with their sample providers to verify. They can still trust them, but they need to verify what's going on. Now, there's one point you mentioned to this, which we've danced around this for quite some time. I'm just going to say the word commodity, because when you start taking the word competition out of the mix, you turn that entity into a commodity. The thing I'm seeing more than anything else is that moment is playing out quite a bit. Now, you and I have talked about how we go about this process of supply, right? We do not have a panel. We don't want a panel. What we want to do is choose what is best for our clients at that moment, and also choose what's best holistically for our systems. And we measure that ad nauseum. We are constantly talking data acceptance. We don't talk volume. We don't talk the idea of, did we get enough? Did we get enough? Did we get enough? We talk data acceptance. That is the continual theme through all of the employees and our strategic conversations. Why is that our conversation when it's not the conversation of everyone else out there? And that's, in many ways, it's because they're buying commodity and thinking they can just remove it at the end. And there's so many gotchas in that moment that we have to be really careful with. People need to understand that it's just one big group of respondents. And the respondents are very much multiple panelists. Panel's not even the right word. They are multiple recruits into as many as 10 or 12 different sources to find surveys. On average, it's 5. So when you start to look at it that way, you really understand how connected this system is. And to me, the big gotcha with this, or the big moment, is the brand really plays out with the quality. It doesn't play out with how much source you can get, how much volume you can get. It plays out with quality. Like if you can't provide a high data acceptance rate for a survey or study, that means that that study is going to have to go back to field. They're going to have to fill in quotas. They're going to have to loop around. All that stuff you can't do, right? Research has timelines. So I look at this as we have not, as an industry, contemplated anywhere near the impact of how our system is so intercombined with each other. You know, it's almost like it's got this tins and gritty pull to it. You know, you pull on one area, the whole thing lops over to one side. You pull on another area or you loosen it up in a certain way, the whole system wants to fold over on itself. We can't do that any longer. We really need to think about what the end goal is. And the sample supplier needs to know what the end goal is.
Yeah, 100%. What outcomes are we seeking? That's like the whole point of a systemic approach to all this. And, ultimately, I'll wrap up here, Rich. This has been awesome. I hope people feel like we brought a little bit of an event that they couldn't attend to their screen through this podcast. I am very conscious, though, whenever I get talking to clients on this level about the holes and the opportunities, and sometimes we get a little technical, or we touch on some of the complexity that maybe goes over people's heads. I always just like to couch it with, don't worry, like, you're not alone. This was like a whole idea when I started Opinion around 2013, and 13 years later, we're still committed to the same idea. We just want the small and mid-sized market research agencies to know, like, you're absolutely not alone trying to figure this out. Yes, it's gnarly. Yes, it's complex. Yes, your clients are paying attention like they never have before, but we're here for you. Like, we definitely can help break this down, make it simpler, make it really applicable in your operation in a way that doesn't throw all the good stuff out. So, Rich, thank you so much for the Data Quality Day recap, and we look forward to the next one.
Thank you.